Our first speaker is going to be our MLA from Doug Routley. He's going to come up. Doug Routley has been a strong, strong advocate for public education for a long time. And I believe he started his career as a school board trustee, so he understands some of the dynamics here. So we're going to welcome Mr. Routley, and thank you very much for coming today. We have a lot of great speakers today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much for all coming out on this lovely liquid day to support public education. As Jeff said, I started my political career as a school trustee, but I'm also the son, the grandson, and the brother of teachers. And I have watched the deterioration of our system, the most equalizing public service of all that we support as citizens over my entire lifetime, in fact. And I now watch my sister, my younger sister in Vancouver, struggle in a classroom with 8 IEPs, with 2 teachers' assistants coming in for bits of a time each day that help her, but she's also got to manage that resource. And so she is absolutely at the edge of collapse in her work. And she's almost at the point of leaving the profession that she loves, that she trained to serve, and I think that needs her service. And this is a common story, all too common. It's so sad that public education, this public service that invests the most in our future, that builds equity for the future, in a province with the highest levels of inequality, would be attacked the way it has been for the past 12 years. The children who were in kindergarten when Christy Clark was education minister and began the undermining of this system are now graduating. Their entire career has been in a system that has been diminished, and it's diminished in serious and significant ways. One teacher I know several years ago said to me, it isn't the loss of direct programming that a child will remember, it's the experience of education. All of us remember being on a sports team or going on a band trip or going on a field trip. Well, those are the first things that go. And then the investment in arts and culture, go. And the significant loss to the fabric of what we are, the identity of us as citizens, begins to be diminished. We have a lovely province, and the greatest resource are the people. And the future of this province depends upon people's ability to innovate. We need people who can innovate and create economy out of the raw logs that are being exported off the shores of this island. We need people who can innovate in a 21st and 22nd century economy that will thrive only if we invest in intellectual capital, in people. And that's what's being lost. We need, in a province of such inequity, people who are literate and critical thinkers who will challenge this affront to our democracy that we see across the board. And that is what is being threatened when teachers can't take the time to really invest in the children that they support. I taught English in Japan many years ago now, and the word for doctor, sensei, the word for teacher, sensei, the same word. A huge respect for education and for teachers. And everyone I talk to expressed such respect for Canadian education, Canadian public education. Everyone I talked to said, you teach your children to think, to be critical thinkers. We admire that. And as I got to know my friends in Japan, I was struck by one particular thing. In Canada, we'll often say, well, I think. Well, my opinion is, I think. Where most of my friends in Japan said, we think. We think this, and we think that. And it wasn't I didn't notice it. It was pointed out to me by a Japanese teacher that is the significant piece, that we teach our children to be critical thinkers, to be independent, to be literate, not just literate in words, but literate in social justice, literate in their rights as citizens, and literate in what we can expect as citizens in our environment. All of these things are challenged when we diminish public education. For years I've been down there, and I've heard the education ministers, one after another, say that we have the highest per student funding ever in this province. So I have asked every one of those education ministers to manage my daughter's allowance. And they could double her allowance. And then they could download onto her huge hydro bill increases. And they could download onto her her teacher's salary increase and MSP premiums and all sorts of other bills that she didn't know anything about. And she would come to me at the end of the week and say, Dad, I don't have the money for all these extra things. And I could simply say to her, well, the education minister says you have the most allowance per child that you've ever had. I mean, it's ridiculous. And for a government that prides itself on not creating deficits, to create such a deficit in our classrooms, in our hospitals, is atrocious. There is no surplus when children live in poverty, as Jeff pointed out. There's no surplus while our schools rot. So it's time for this government to hear the people, to invest in the people, to invest in our future. And when the NDP takes office, I know that John Horgan, who was education critic for years, and I sat on the Education Select Standing Committee with him, will make the investment that it takes to have, again, a thriving public education system. Because right now, it thrives on the back of teachers like my sister and at the expense of the children. The caring professions are being driven to the edge of desperation, and we need to tell the government enough is enough, time to reinvest, time to treat the children of this province and its future with respect. So thank you for coming out and adding your voice and your face to that effort.